Good morning, everyone. Before we do any introductions, I want to start, Taylor, if you go to the next slide. Thank you for your patience. We were figuring out our microphone situation. But just watching a couple of things carefully and thinking, what do all of these different objects have in common? So for subject number one, oh, what do you think some of these objects have in common? We can put that in the chat. I've got that pulled up right now. You can also unmute. Now, we do have a weird room setup situation with a microphone and then a screen. So we can't hear if you're saying something right away to minimize the feedback, but we do have Taylor who's helping us out by listening to the Zoom as well. Yeah, tech devices. Interactive as well. Thank you. Well, if we go to the next slide, we'll see a couple of other things that these tech items and other items have in common as well. They all, for example, use batteries or they plug in or somehow use electricity. They have buttons, some of them have inputs and outputs, and they're all computers. What we'll be talking about today is our process and our work in developing computational thinking assembly for grades 3rd to 5th grade. So we're going to start now with some introductions. My name is Mahmoud. I use he and him pronouns. I'm a learning and instruction specialist at the Science Museum of Minnesota. 5'10", head to toe, 6'4" wingspan, and I never know what to do with my arms. We also have a couple of additional people who are joining us.
We also have today Emily Poster, myself, Dana Karls, and two more colleagues, Kirsten Meltison and Kelley Meister. Our session agenda for the day, we are going to give an overview of our Inspire CT program, a couple of demos, including an everyday computing demo, which Mahmoud will be doing. We will be going over the evolution of our learning goals. We will be doing an algorithmic recycling demo from our programming, go over how we introduce bias in CT, talking about some career connections. We will show our computational thinking family event and have a discussion at the end. Our learning goals for the session are to introduce you to the computational thinking assembly and family event offerings, provide an increased understanding of our developmental process, and show you how you can bring the Science Museum of Minnesota's CT assembly and/or family events to your school. So a quick overview of our Inspire CT project. It is a strategic initiative to increase and sustain effective and equitable computational thinking education in Minneapolis and Hopkins Public Schools. Through partnering with districts and schools, we engage students in CT residencies, family event programming, assemblies, and teacher professional development. We try to ensure sustainability by integrating CT into core academic subjects like SEL and literacy, and we prioritize equity, inclusion, and effective engagement with students traditionally underrepresented in computing and other STEM careers.
Okay, so we want to start by talking about the year 2018 and think about where you were during that time. Black Panther was just coming out, so was The Incredibles 2, and a good amount of the campers that we have every summer were not born yet. And in 2018, one of the things that we were trying to do as part of the Inspire CT project was to put together an assembly that would really introduce computational thinking to the 3rd to 5th grade audience. And we started out by looking at what our learning goals would be. And we came up with 2 learning goals. Next slide. Learning goal number 1 was really that computational thinking is a process and that there are particular parts to it, right? So looking at data, using logic to make decisions, interpreting information, finding solutions to problems. And that number 2 was that people use computational thinking to solve all kinds of problems and in all types of different careers. And what we learned in going through the process of creating that assembly is that we really needed to go back and figure out what we wanted to communicate to students and how we wanted to do it. Which brings us to revisiting our assembly and thinking about what are the things that have changed and why have they changed? What is it that we really wanted to communicate to our audiences, to teachers, to students, to community members across the board? And we came up with 5 distinct learning goals. And those 5, I won't read the entire thing, is looking at, 1, the fact that computers are ubiquitous, right? And they help us solve all kinds of different problems, but they can only do what they're programmed to do, which is one of their limitations, but that they do those things really quickly, really accurately, and they can handle a lot of information in a way that we can. But that people also have particular strengths that computers do not. We have particular capabilities, whether we choose to employ them or not all of the time, but we do have those capabilities. That huge learning goal, number 1, became a smaller but core learning goal that when we combine what it is that people do well and the things that computers do well, that we use these computational thinking practices. We abstract information and we look for different ways that we can break down problems and communicate our solutions. And the 5th learning goal, which we will talk about in more detail a little bit later on, because it's such a huge and abstract concept, especially for 3rd to 5th graders, that all people have biases and that these biases can make their way into the programs we create. And which is why it's so important to make sure that we're being as equitable and inclusive as possible when we use these tools and or create solutions or create brand new tools as well. One of the demonstrations in the original 2018 version of the assembly focus on logic tree recycling. We'll come back to that. We opened up this particular session by looking at a couple of different tools, right? A couple of different interactive devices, the clap lamp, the baby toy, and the birthday card, which is how we open up the assembly as well. Looking at the fact that computers are everywhere and that computers help us solve different problems. They help us communicate as well. And now we'll talk a little bit about the logic tree recycling. From the 2018 version of the assembly, we had a couple of different demonstrations, some of which we decided to not use in this 2024 iteration of the assembly, and some of which we decided to keep. And the logic tree recycling demonstration is one that we decided to keep with a couple of modifications that we'll talk about in just a little bit. And we're actually going to show the logic tree recycling demonstration now. So in 2018, one of the things that we wanted to show is that you can use logic to break down problems and find particular solutions. For example, you might need to sort different types of objects when you're recycling them or putting them away. So we do have one sorter who is programmed to sort things into 2 categories. Either something is recyclable or it's not. But we also wanted to show students that you can keep asking simple yes or no questions and break down problems even further. So while something is not recyclable, it might be compostable or not. And while something is recyclable, it might be a bottle or Now, we have a couple of different objects for us to sort. For example, you have chips bags, milk cartons, apple juice bottles, and comedically oversized banana peels. And we'll have two additional sorters. We'll sort our stacks into those sub stacks. One of the advantages of the demonstration is that it also gets kids experience with recycling complex. And I think we can pause after these two final items. So that's the 2018 version of the logic tree recycling. And if we can get our slide deck back up, we'll talk a little bit about the things that have changed as well. Awesome, thank you. To the next one, yes. Okay, so in 2024, we looked at what we had in terms of the logic tree recycling and wanted to see if we can add an additional dimension to it, and decided to look at these three particular learning goals, right? That computers only do the things that they're programmed to do, but they do it very quickly and very accurately, but also that there's many capabilities that people have that computers don't. We have the capability to be empathetic, creative, curious. We're also able to value things in a way that computers are not. So we decided to introduce a couple of additional things. Some championships, artwork, and some permission slips for a field trip to the Science Museum of Minnesota. So we'll see the way that this changes our demonstration a little bit, if we can have our sorters back up. And we'll put the things that we value on our easel. Thank you. I'm going to give our presenters a quick round of applause. You can give yourselves a round of applause as well, volunteers. Thank you. And then if we can get our slide deck back up. Go to the next one. Awesome, thank you. Now, I mentioned that we would talk in a little bit more detail about the fifth learning goal, which is that all people have biases. And when biases are integrated into the programs we create, they can replicate those inequities. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we're being equitable and inclusive in how we use and how we create the tools that we currently have or create brand new ones. The question of equity in computing, algorithmic biases, was always something that we incorporated in our teacher PD. So it was something that we always talked about with adults. And we thought that it was really important to include such a huge topic when we're working with kids as well. And the question really became, how do we address bias in computing in an accessible way without causing further harm? We went through a couple of different ideas. We could use these data sets and look at the way that kids play. We could find an elaborate way to poll kids about something at the beginning of the assembly and bring it back closer to the end of the assembly. But bias as a concept, bias in computing data sets are such huge abstract concepts that we were really looking for a way that we can communicate it in a concrete fashion. And so we decided to look at one form of bias that kids would be able to recognize right away, right? That 90% of people, I think, are right-handed and around 10% are left-handed. And so there's a natural bias to creating tools that are suited for right-handed people.
And if you're left-handed, that you either need to find tools that are uniquely suited for people who are left-handed or adapt to using right-handed tools. And that this would be an entryway into how we could introduce the concept of bias that is unintentional, but still has a large ramification. And if we can play our video, we'll see the 3 different things that we have our volunteers do for this activity. One is cutting a circle out of a piece of paper using right-handed scissors and using left-handed scissors. You can see that our right-handed volunteer is breezing through it on the left and is having a little bit more difficulty doing it with the left-handed scissors on the right. So that's one thing that we ask our volunteers to do. Another one is to sharpen a pencil using either a right-handed pencil sharpener or a left-handed pencil sharpener, and that video clip should start shortly as well. So you can see our volunteer struggling a little bit more with the left-handed sharpener on the right, but has already accomplished the task using the right-handed sharpener on the left. And the final one is to find a specific card in a set of cards that are made either for left-handed people or for right-handed people. Our volunteer already found the card in the right-handed deck and is struggling to look for it a little bit more in the left-handed deck. Wonderful. But we also didn't want to minimize bias by shrinking it down to, well, some people are right-handed, some people are left-handed. And that's where a lot more of those career connections come in. We do want to give a quick content notice that the next 2 slides have some videos moving in the background, just in case anybody has sensory needs that need to be accommodated. To connect the bias of tools that are created for people who are left-handed versus people who are right-handed, we shared a connection to Joy Balamwini, thank you, who researches discrimination in AI. Her backstory is, I believe she was working on her PhD, which would scan people's faces and put messages on it, like affirmative messages. And what she encountered is that the AI tools did a much better job of scanning people with lighter skin than it did people of darker skin, right? And so looking at the way that those biases made their way into the algorithms that are being used to train these different tools, and seeing how we can do computing in a way that serves all people. And this is something that we explicitly call out in the assembly. Another one being hometown hero, Marlena Miles, who is an artist who uses augmented reality to share the land, history, and culture and language of the Dakota people. And the reason that we wanted to really make these career connections is, personally speaking, I think it's a lot more concrete and a lot more real to have examples of people who are using computing to create these specific augmented reality pieces of art, right? And be able to share, hey, this is somebody who's actually using this in a way that a lot of people don't think of using it, than it is to say, you know, artists use computational thinking as well. So to really ground it in the work that people are doing, the work that people of all backgrounds, and the viewpoints that they bring into computing and computational thinking. We also made these career connections throughout our family events, which I will now let Emily Poster talk about.
Thanks, Mahmoud. So yes, for some of the reasons Mahmoud mentioned, we felt that it's really important to keep career connections flowing between our assembly and also our family events that are focused on computational thinking. Our family events are usually afternoon or evening events where we partner with a school to invite their families from their school communities in to engage together in multi-generational learning around different activity stations with computational thinking. We will also be adding a large group demonstration portion to this in the coming year. But our station signs, one of which you see in the foreground of this photo, on one side, it provides station directions and facilitation questions so that adults and children can work together on the activity that's on the station before them. And on the flip side, there are career connections, highlighting individuals from diverse backgrounds, both demographically, but also in terms of like what was their path to get to their career and how do they use computational thinking in those careers. Sharing about careers is especially important at family events because we know from research connected or around career choices that children are often making their early decisions about their career paths long before we might expect, and that parents, caregivers, and other adults in children's lives have a huge impact on the choices they're going to make and the direction that they're thinking about what their future careers could be. So we want to make sure we're providing exposure to a variety of careers in this way. So here's a few examples from our family event. This is our tangram station, and on the sign, on the back of the sign, so at the station, families use TANs to break down and put together the images that they see on that tablecloth, which is a connection to the computational thinking skills of decomposition and pattern recognition. And then on the back, we see Kira E. Hicks, who uses those same skills in her work with quilts, but she also includes many aspects of identity and storytelling in her work. Another station we want to highlight is our movement patterns station, which focuses even more on pattern recognition and creation and uses games that ask participants to use their bodies to engage with patterns. And our career connection here is with a dancer and choreographer who draws upon math and patterns really heavily in her work and choreographing. And then we have our bus route algorithm station where families are asked to write an algorithm for an efficient bus route. So to make a stop at each of those houses to pick up students on the way to the school and working out what algorithm does that most efficiently. And this connects to a professional with a career as an air traffic controller who works in a similar way to ensure efficiency, but also we add in then the topic of safety and how air traffic controllers contribute to air safety. So we've taken you on a whirlwind tour of some of the ways that we have been working to bring joy and authenticity into the computational thinking education work that we do. But we'd love to hear from all of you as well on what are some ways that you do that. So I'd like to just open the floor to hear from each of you of what are some of the ways you either do that in your classroom currently or are thinking you might like to in the future, or in whatever setting that you are teaching in and working with adults and young people around these topics.
May I jump in?
Please.
And are you hearing feedback? Okay. I do want to call out some of the things that I've seen as I've worked with teachers, like visiting classrooms during residencies or during different professional development sessions or just chatting one-on-one is one of the things that I've heard from teachers that has really shifted kind of their perspective in computer science, computational thinking, but then also leads to a lot of authentic, joyful learning is I'm seeing a lot of collaboration among teachers who might be teaching their content area, but are also looking at different ways to work with, for example, the phys ed teachers in their school, right? Of how can we incorporate motion and kinetics into how we're teaching computer science and computational thinking so that it isn't at a screen all day, every day, or really looking for those integrationary approaches to how do we get this content area aligned with what we're working on so that it's not 2 meals on 1 plate, if that's not a saying. I am very anti like 2-in-1 shampoo conditioner because 2 can't be 1. So how do we make it so that it's not 2-in-1 shampoo conditioner? How do we make it so that we're really aligning what we're doing with math and these computational thinking skills? I apologize for the strange analogy. And I
Thank you.
saw things in the chat as well.
Yeah. So we have enjoying debugging or using those opportunities as power-ups. Yeah, it's great. Definitely see a lot of fun and joy coming through debugging and doing that successfully. And then I see we do an app design project where students design and create a prototype in Keynote to solve a problem. One of the best ones so far this year was an item tracker to track clothing and other items between 2 homes. That's awesome, and a really authentic and useful application of that. And then I look for ways to make sure the content is relatable. Computers are everywhere, but kids don't always realize this. So I really like to show where computers show up in their lives in unexpected ways. I also really love Scratch because it's a joyful and fun way to be the creator and not just a user. For sure. Thank you, Kelley. Would any others like to share on that question? Or if you have questions for us about assemblies or family events, we'd be happy to field those as well. Remixing projects in Scratch is great for personalizing as well, for sure. Being able to really personalize and express yourself and your identity or interests through computational thinking, that's really powerful and can be a very joyful task. We will move along. We're moving quickly. So we'll be able to give you all a few minutes back in your day between sessions. But we want to hear from you. So if there are other things you think of, ways that you are already bringing joy and authenticity to your learning environment, or ways that you're thinking about starting, we would love to hear more about those in addition to the ones in the chat. Taylor will drop this link in the chat so you have that, and we're going to collect some of those responses on a Google form so that we can share them back with the group. And then finally, we want to say thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you have any questions or want to follow up on anything you saw or heard this morning, you can reach all of us, the whole group of presenters and project sorters at inspirect@smm.org. And we will be, so the CT assembly, which you saw little bits of this morning, and we were watching a video of a pilot of that sorting activity right before we joined you all this morning. And we were so sad we didn't have a way with photo releases to be able to show that with you and see how much excitement and joy comes through with the kids. We're a poor substitute for the enthusiasm that we see when they're really participating in that hands-on learning. But we will be scheduling pilots of the new CT assembly this fall in the coming school year. So if that's something you're interested in possibly having at your school, our pilots have no cost to the school. It's just based on availability. So if that's something you're interested in, or if you're interested in booking a family event or the assembly later in the year when it's finalized, you can reach out to schooloutreach@smm.org to book any of those programs or to inquire about more information for them. So with that, We thank you all for being here and for participating with us and allowing us to share some of the work we've been doing and that we are excited about. And we hope you have a good rest of the conference. Thank you
And
so
that
much.
you're able to get outside at some point today. Because it's not late. We're in the period where we have 2 weeks of good weather.
Exactly. It might be a nice 15-minute outdoor break. Thank you all very much.